G'day there. Well, I've just come back from a 6-day paddle on the Murray River. For those of you not from Australia, the Murray River is the border between our state, Victoria, and the state above us, New South Wales. It's an iconic Australian river. It's over 2,500 kilometres in length, and it's a great place to paddle a canoe. You can navigate the river almost for the entirety of its length, and it's just a wonderful experience paddling down the Murray River. There are very few official campsites, but there are a great many wild campsites. And generally when we are out camping, we just go wild camping. We just set up our tents on the side of the river, pull our boats in where we can find a spot and set up camp for the night and enjoy an overnight stop and then get on our way again the next morning. So when you do this wild camping, of course, there's no facilities, so you need to be somewhat independent and somewhat well set up to be able to cope with the fact that you've got no facilities. If we haven't met before, my name's Larry. I am the carnivore pensioner. So besides being a canoe enthusiast, I am also a person who's been on the carnivore diet for about 7 months now. So when you put those two things together and you think of camping and then you think of carnivore diet, it often presents challenges because what are we going to eat when we go canoeing? Now, I only eat 4 things. I eat meat and salt and butter and eggs. That is the sum total of my diet. So in this video, I just wanted to share with you some of the particular challenges that you have camping on a carnivore diet. And this is a topic that may concern a number of people, particularly those who are both carnivore and campers. How are you going to link the two? Now, of course, every camping situation is different, but most of the camping I do is wild camping, as I've just said. So I need to carry my own meat. Now, you may notice here in the canoe, I have an esky here. This is a somewhat budget esky, but it just lifts up like that and it fits just behind my seat, and I can keep enough meat in there for 4 or 5 days. This esky is not real high end, it's more a budget end, although it's fairly decent. I can keep meat cold in there in most conditions for about 4 days. So this last week we were out for 6 days, so I had to make do the last couple of days with some dehydrated meat that I'd taken with me for that purpose. So that's obviously the first challenge you're going to encounter when you're on carnivore and camping, is that if you're eating meat, meat needs some sort of refrigeration. And if you're wild camping, you don't have access to electricity. And some people who go camping in 4-wheel drives or RVs or trailers might have some sort of electrical system where they can have a proper electric fridge with them. And of course, that's a great advantage. But you can't do that when you're in a canoe. You need an esky. So let's talk about eskies just for a moment. As I said, I've got a fairly budget esky and it's okay for about 4 days. Now, not all eskies are created equal, and some eskies are a lot better than others. So the first thing to think about when you're going camping as a carnivore is what sort of esky you have. Now, as I said, you get about 4 days out of this one. If you go up to the high-end eskies, you can get up to 10 days out of eskies without having to change the ice. Now, 10 days, that's quite a reasonable length of time, but you're going to pay some dollars for those good eskies. Let me give you an example of 2 eskies that come to mind. One brand that I believe is an American brand but has really taken off big time here in Australia would be YIZI. Now, YIZI make a Tundra cooler, and this cooler is admittedly high-end, as is all the YIZI products, but they have an outstanding reputation for quality, and they tell us that the YIZI coolers will give you 7 to 10 days of keeping the ice frozen. Now, of course, there's variables in this in terms of what weather you're going to be camping in and how many times you open it and so forth, but it gives you an idea of the capacity of that esky. Another esky at the high end of things would be the Pelican Elite Cooler. Now, again, they say these are rated for keeping ice frozen for about 10 days. So again, a pretty impressive number. But again, it's going to cost you a little bit of money to get that. I'll show you a third one. This one is a cheaper option. I guess I would call this mid-range. Now, I've not got one of these myself, but I am looking at this particular brand. It is an esky that's called the Dometic, that's the brand name, and it's called a Cool Ice series. Now, these ones are sort of mid-range in price, and they, again, also are rated for about 10 days. Now, they may not have all the bells and whistles that the dearer ones have got, but they are going to keep your meat cold. So that's another one you could have a look at. But so consider what your budget is. Obviously, if you're only going out once a year or something, you're not going to be wanting to spend several $100s on a quality esky, and you're going to make do some other way. But if you're somebody who's camping fairly regularly, or that you're well off for cash, it could be worth investing in one of the high-end eskies. Now, besides your choice of esky, there's a number of things that you can do in order to help keep your meat cold, no matter what brand or market level your esky is. And the first thing to do would be to pre-cool your esky. In other words, you open your esky and get maybe some crushed ice from a garage or a petrol station, a gas station, whatever you call them. They sell, most gas stations here sell bags of ice. So you just simply put a bag of ice in there for a couple of hours before you pack it yourself, and that cools down the esky before you start, so that it's a cold esky you're putting the food into. Kind of like the same principle as warming up the oven before you cook your roast. A second suggestion that you could do to help keep the ice frozen longer would be to use block ice instead of the cube ice. Obviously, a larger block is going to melt more slowly than the cube ice. Even though it's more room and more bulky and it's going to take up some of the space, it's usually worth getting some bulk ice. Sometimes I will fill up little water bottles that I buy in the supermarket, and I will freeze those and put them in the esky as ice. And the advantage of that system is that when it does eventually melt, you've got some bottles of cold water in your esky to drink. Another principle that you could look at would be layering your esky. In other words, when you're packing your esky, you think things through a little bit. So on the bottom of your esky, you might put some sheets of ice, and then you would pack in your meat and then another layer of ice, and keep this layering method so that you have meat, ice. And this is going to help keep the meat cold and at a proper temperature for much longer if you do that. Another tip I could give you would be to get your steaks or whatever it is you're going to take camping. I like a good eye fillet steak or a ribeye myself to cook at camp. But whatever you're going to take, if you can put a little bit of salt on that before you pack it, because the salt is a preservative, and way back before the days when we had refrigeration, they used salt to preserve their meat. So put a little bit of salt on it, and then put it in a vacuum seal bag. And if you've got one of those vacuum sealing machines in your kitchen somewhere, you can vacuum seal that bag and then put it in the freezer and freeze it so it's vacuum sealed, and then it's frozen, and then it's going between two layers of ice. So these are all things that are going to help. Of course, the last thing I would want to add there is that obviously, when you're out camping, where you put your esky, you want to keep it out of the sun if possible. Put it in the shade, and if you've got it in the boat, try and have something over it so that it's not in direct sunlight. And also, avoid opening it unless you really have to, because every time you open that esky, all of the cold air is going to go out and all of the warm air is going to come in, and it puts you at a disadvantage. So think through carefully what you need out of the esky and get everything out at once so that you're not continually opening and closing it, and that'll make the esky last longer. Now, the next thing you need to think about when you're out camping with your esky full of meat is how are you going to cook it? Now, obviously, you can just take some sort of gas stove with you, a jet boil or something like that. I've got one of those and they're quite handy. But for me, if I'm going to cook a good piece of meat and I'm out camping, I want to cook it over the fire. I mean, it's just so much better. Now, the problem is it's not always ideal to light a fire when you're out camping, depending on where you are, and what the setting is, what the surroundings are, what the regulations are, and all that sort of thing. So what I often do is I will take this little stove here. This is a firebox stove. Now it's in a leather case, but I really love this little stove, and I'll just show you very quickly. This is the stove itself, and it's all hinged, so immediately it just unfolds into a square shape. And then, I don't know how well you'll see this, but it has got a floor that just drops down and becomes the base of the fire. Then there's things like a little ashtray you can put underneath if you want, and there's different grill plates that you can put on top. So I've got a number of grill plates here, something like that. There's different sizes, and you've also got some fire sticks so you can arrange your fire and your cooking surface at different levels. But all you do with that is it just operates off twigs, and no matter where you are, there's usually twigs on the ground somewhere, and I find this just a great little stove. It's so easy to start. You don't need to carry any fuel because the fuel is wherever you are. You don't need great big pieces of wood, you just need twigs. Now, obviously with twigs, they're going to burn very quickly, but the idea is you can keep feeding it. So you're sitting there feeding the fire twigs. And if you've got after you've been going for a while, you do build up a little bit of a coal base, and then you're right to put your grill plate on and to cook. Now, you'll see here that I had this out at camp just last week on the banks of the Murray River. And look, there's nothing more delightful than to be sitting by the river with a little stove, cooking some meat and enjoying the sunset over the water. There's just nothing to match that. So think about how you're going to cook. There's all sorts of stoves on the market, and that's just the one that I use, and I find it really works well, and it packs up nice and flat. It's set up in less than a minute, ready to go, and I don't need to carry any fuel. So that's called the firebox stove. I will leave a link to that stove down below. I think it's an Australian link, but I'm pretty sure you can get them in the States. Might be where they come from originally, as all good things do, don't they? But anyway, I'll leave a link down below for that. It's called the firebox stove, and they are immensely popular, and for good reason. Of course, there's cheaper versions too, like there is of everything. And again, it depends on how often you're going to use it and how often you're going to go camping. But there's a lot to be said for this one right here. I think one final thing that you're going to keep in mind when you're going camping on the carnivore diet is that you're going to probably need to eat more than what you normally do at home. This is because you're no doubt expending more energy throughout the day than you would be at home. Like when we're paddling canoes, we're carrying bags of gear that just drop into the canoe. We've got to set up tents. We've got to set up camp. We've got to, get our boat packed up the next morning. We've got to paddle for 5 or 6 hours that day. So all of this is expending energy. So you're going to need a greater intake of energy just to get through the day. So at home, I would normally only have a breakfast about 9 o'clock in the morning and a second meal about mid-afternoon, and that's all I would have. But when I'm out paddling in the canoe, I would generally have 3 meals a day. So I would still do the basic egg and bacon for breakfast and make a cup of coffee and usually an electrolyte drink. And then when we stop for lunch, I usually have a little plastic tub in the esky of some cold meat. Maybe I'll roast up a bit of lamb or pork or beef before I go, and I pack this up in containers so that I just get it out. I can eat it. It's cold. It's quite delicious on the side of the river. And then I might have a couple of pieces of cheese, and that's my lunch. It's a fairly basic lunch, but it does me quite well. And of course, when I get to camp at the end of the day, that's when I can relax, set things up properly, get the firebox stove out, and cook a beautiful piece of steak, and just enjoy it there on the side of the river. I usually pour myself some mineral water with a squeeze of lemon in it, and I'm sitting there by the Murray. I just love it. You can tell that, don't you? It's very addictive, this lifestyle of canoeing on the river. So that's just a few thoughts about the being a carnivore and going camping, and putting the two together. Let me tell you, it is possible. You do have to put a few things together, and you do have to give it a bit of forethought before you go. And it's always possible to do quite well when you're camping on the carnivore diet. Now, some of you might be interested in the camping equipment that I take with me. Let me just quickly, I won't go through all of it, but just the main pieces. I use a Nature Hike Mongor 2 tent. I've had this tent for several years now. It's a fantastic little tent. I really like it. I think it's rated as a 3-person tent. It gives me plenty of room inside to put myself and my sleeping mat and my bags. And just last week we had one night where it rained, very heavy torrential rain all night, and not a drop of water came into this tent. It's what I would call probably a mid-range tent. You can pay thousands of dollars for tents, but this Nature Hike one has done me well. It's served me well. I can put it up in 5 minutes. It's just been a great tent. In terms of sleeping mats, I've got this little one here. This is a Cedar Summit. It's called a Camp Plus SI, self-inflating mat, and it packs up a little bit smaller than a sleeping bag, and this is quite a comfortable bed. I've tried 3 or 4 different ones. Of course, being my age, you want to be comfortable at night, and you can spend all sorts of money on them. But this is what I would consider, again, to be fairly mid-range. I try to go mid-range with most of my camping gear, and I find that quite comfortable. I will put a link below to all of the camping gear that I have. I've only mentioned a couple of items here, but I have a chair and a few other things that I will list there. If you're interested to see what I have, they're down below. But look, you've got to get what's right for you. But it is worth, if you want to go out camping, setting up with some reasonable gear that you know is going to be reliable and to see you through the trip. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you. What do you do when you go camping? Do you go camping as a carnivore? What equipment do you take? How do you keep your meat cold? All of those sorts of things. If you've got any experience to share with us, just put it in the comments down below. I love to get comments, and I do read them all, and I do reply to them all. While I was out camping last week, I did manage to record just a very short video sitting on the banks of the river. And if you missed that one, I'll leave a link to it above. I don't know which side it'll be, so I'll point both sides. But look, thanks for watching this video. Please join our Facebook group, The Carnivore Pensioner. I will see you on the next video. And until then, keep telling your story, won't you?